Hello. Hello. Will someone unmute and we can check our participants? Oh, wait, you're muted. Let me unmute.
It also helped him qualify for the Florida Win.
Hi, can you all hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Like 3 computers open, so. Great. So that was our piece. Something is coming. I'm Kite. I'm an Oglala Lakota performance artist and composer. I am currently based in Los Angeles on unceded Tongva land. I am currently here, and I'm about to be moving to Tulsa to join the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. And I am a PhD candidate at Concordia University. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan Young. I'm actually located in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the moment as a part of the Tulsa Artist Fellowship's Arts Integration Grant from the George Kaiser Family Foundation. Multidisciplinary artist whose work encompasses improvisation, documentary, design, sound design, just multidisciplinary artist. But I am a Pawnee, Kiowa, and of Delaware descent, and sitting council member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians. I'm the secretary of the tribal council at the moment. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. We're so excited that we could find a way to come together during quarantine. I know that this performance was initially supposed to be hosted here in Dojage, Mounier, Montreal. So I'm really glad to see that there was a way that you two could make this happen in a way that was still site specific, and finding new ways to work together. I think maybe it would be nice to know a little bit about the places in which you're coming from and how you've come to work together and know each other, and what else you're working on would be great.
Yeah, I think the beginning of this project actually started in Montreal. It started when we were, sorry, I'm managing this too. I'm just going to close this for now. We invited Nathan to do a residency at the Initiative for Indigenous Futures. And there we kind of started brainstorming about we started reading a bunch of stories, which some of those you could see in this piece. And we were trying to find ways to imagine the future of, imagine if listening into the future of an electrical grid. And Nathan, you can jump in anytime to add anything. But we ended up working a lot with, we were ripping apart guitar cables and shoving them into TVs, and with the help of Travis. And oh yeah, I can.
Yeah, I during that residency, it was really the I guess the kernel or the inspiration for this how this piece developed. But I'm like today thinking about everything, putting everything together, and thinking about something Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth wrote in one of her books about a question. Somebody asked her what was her favorite instrument, and she said electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of this idea that we're really trying to listen to the grid. We're trying to kind of touch and access this idea of what electricity means, how how we use it, and how it creates place, how it has created place. There, in here, there. One of the kind of we yeah I, we just recently had a dam, an issue. So many. It seems that we go from crisis to crisis all the time. And recently we had I don't even remember what the crisis was at the time, but these barges had gotten loose, and these dams were going to destroy all of these communities here. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't want to end on a non sequitur or anything like that, but or just like kind of be scattered. But one thing is that I come from what is the capital of the Cherokee Nation. I grew up in this place called Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and that's where the Cherokees were removed to. I'm not Cherokee. I'm a member of the Cherokee. It's very complicated. As a Delaware, as a Lenape, I'm an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation as well. We have the right to dual enrollment, and so I'm a full Cherokee. I've spent a great part of my last 5 years working on their documentary series. The kind of this what I find interesting is this idea of kind of public domain. The one thing that a lot of people don't know that was one of the first public domain cases, public domain uses, was in the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, in Tahlequah, to create Lake Tenkiller and that dam that was eventually hit by those barges this year.
Yeah, we should also say that we started working together because we went to Bard MFA together, and we were both in music sound. And because of that, we kind of had this shared idea of listening. So this kind of led to really site-specific listening. And I think in this process because we did this process in Montreal a little bit, but then we really did it in Calgary with a long-term, more like a more than a week of research and like in place. And then we had research assistants in that place. So we really went deep into, with the help of Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse, to go deep into what was going on there. With the electricity, with the mystery of who provides electricity, where electricity actually comes from, it becomes very, very difficult to trace exactly where it comes from. But I think that the technique of listening helps to try to get there. And so here in this piece, we're listening to the sounds of sounds, and we're looking at archival footage of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then a lot of Glendale. I was living in Glendale, but now I'm living in East Los Angeles, and so we're hearing that too, field recordings. And so what we're proposing here is, you hear a lot of noise, a lot of guitar noise and other forms of noise, and we're trying to not even imagine, it's real. When you're listening to electrical sounds coming from a place, you are listening to the chain of events that creates that electricity, and it comes from a natural source no matter what you do. And eventually you listen. So when Nathan plays noise guitar in Tulsa, we're listening to a dam go through a transformation. So I think that, yeah. Should I unmute you? Is it do I have that power right now?
That's really exciting, and I appreciate that thinking around dams, especially, and how things like dams and infrastructure for electricity has often been a site of dispossession for Native people in a lot of different contexts. So sort of that reimagining of finding that source in which to explore those geographies, I think is so exciting and palpable. Listening through it as well.
Just hearing folks speak about place creating and place making. I also think about within our communities, we also understand as place keeping and sustaining. Just also wondering how this understanding of place has shifted when making across such distance, and perhaps like how your senses of listening have shifted when listening to a grid that is like stretched across time and place in a bit of a different way, collaborating across land and waters. Do you want to talk a bit about how those things have shifted for you?
Yeah. I do the grid view since I'm looking at me, I remain tiny. Okay, I'm gonna go grid. All right, here we all are. The team view. Um, so I think what's interesting about this is when we did the research in Calgary, we never figured out, we were they make it so vague and so difficult. Maybe it's national security reasons, maybe it's just the way that the bidding wars are set up daily for utility, that it's actually impossible to know where your power comes from in that place because there's multiple different sources. And so the vagueness of it kept it in this it's like a mystery that can be solved but is being chosen not to be solved. And so here, I kind of went into this time knowing that it's impervious. I don't know, not impervious, but you can't put a finger on it. And so the ask us questions in the comments of the Facebook Live. I think that it helped here to leave it as we know that we're listening to similar structures across distance, and there's no way to really know. Just like, I mean, I feel like same with maps, there's no way to truly map a place because mapping is a lie, and intimacy with place is not that. So I don't know. I think that's kind of where I ended up. What do you think, Nathan?
Well, I think the thing that really kind of sticks with me in my mind is this idea that these are natural places now, or that have been modified, when actually the water table and the complete waterways of North America have already been altered to such a great extent that there is some confusion about actually where they've already been changed, for so long and so drastically. Understanding the diversion, diverting these great sources of power, all of this water and into energy. It creates complexity to it. It complicates the discussion. I think, though, that to go back to kind of the original question, I think that we work on other projects. Suzanne and I work on other projects together as well, quite often, and so it was kind of a natural, for us and to be able to collaborate in that way. But in a sense, I mean, it's really in a sense the same thing. It's elemental. It's water. It's electricity. It's these things that are I don't want to say universal, but they're they're connected. They're connected already still.
Should I talk about what we were hearing and seeing? I think I can try to name all the stuff that we saw. We were seeing archival footage of a dam break in Baldwin Hills in Los Angeles. This is not in order. We saw a photo of a gas tanker that was floating and had hit, I think it was in the 70s in Tulsa. We saw archival footage of the 1986 Tulsa dam break and flood, and some flyover of that. And I think we also saw, the first image was the image of the first electrical pole in the United States, which is being raised, and there's an American flag on it, and it's the photo is framed really interestingly, so it's like this worship thing happening. And then what we're listening to is Nathan on noise guitar, We're listening to a Novatron recording that we recorded at the National Music Center with Nathan playing Novatron. We're hearing field recordings that I collected in Los Angeles. And I actually threw in, I got sidetracked, the hum, which is like a phenomenon heard around the world. The hum is in there. It had a really nice tone. I thought that was interesting. I think the supernatural perceptions of electricity kind of are relevant, especially Western ideas of supernatural versus indigenous ideas of the supernatural.
Did you feel?
Sorry.
No, I think we're relaying the same thing.
There is a question here in the comments from Carl, who's not all the way through the video yet, so isn't caught up with us, but is asking if the story relayed throughout the recording, if that's a traditional story.
So it's unclear whether it is a fully traditional story because of the habits of anthropologists. This one's J.R. Walker. There has been some things raised about about whether he edited the stories or not. This one is I think it's a George Sword story, and it's the story of Stone Boy. So it is it's a traditionalist story, I think, as close as you can get. But it's not. It's a heavily printed one and reprinted one in Lakota Myths. So it's not. It's not. It's been transformed by transmission already. So, but I think it's really interesting the way Thunderbird drops in and out of Stone Boy's consciousness throughout the story.
And the second part of that question too was if in the first section was the instrumentation live or looped?
Both. Well, instruments are always live at some point.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's kind of, I don't know, what do we call that? Experimental country country drone. I don't know what we're gonna dub that.
Oh no, don't do it. Don't dub it that. Don't dub no country drone. No country drone.
American Indian Gothic country drone.
Would attend.
Yes. Nathan sent me some looping recordings, and I looped them even further and distorted them, and then I slowed them down, and then I added violin, and then I added more violin, and then I think more violin, and then more guitar, and then it ended up as a whatever that is, whatever we're gonna call that.
Amazing.
Should I jump in on that? I'm in Oklahoma. Country was here and kind of the soundtrack before country was cool. I heard earlier today, that was all that was on the radio. It's kind of a shared interest of ours in a way, Suzanne and I. So for me, it's just an opportunity to it's something I've really I've had a kind of a focus, an interest on and learning about, the history of that. It's the soundtrack of this, of where I'm at, it's what people truly listen to, and I think it complicates things too. Here you walk into American Indian tribal offices, you'll hear the worst kind of country music, playing on people's desktops and things like that. And so it's kind of, again, it's kind of the soundtrack to where I am, that's how I feel. It's kind of where, and also I feel like we're kind of telling a story here, very much like in Calgary, about the development of this grid. And it really is those kind of, it goes from, a trail to a plank into a street, a gravel dirt road into gravel, and bars pop up and things like that. And so to me, that's kind of, it may seem very, didactic or but to me, it's just, it feels very natural to do those types of things. And it's kind of I think our kind of concept was kind of these tried and true country kind of tropes, these kind of twang, these open, these kind of musical techniques that are in, you hear in a lot of country songs that go to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which offers like another sort of way into that response of where you're at too, and in creating those sort of, again, those new pathways of one place to another.
Yeah, I mean, so the second track had that like poem I wrote in Calgary, and that came from a similar idea where I got really obsessed with the uh, humanoid something Reddit subreddit, and humanoid like phenomenon where people see humanoid, not human, sort of human figures. And I saw a pattern on there where they're always on roads, like always on roads. And I think the Western mind, and maybe, I don't know, I think the indigenous mind too also sees things. Roads are haunted. I mean, they're haunted because they're really, really, really old. Like where we see a giant highway now, and people die on highways all the time. I think the same thing. And I think the electricity lines are built on that road. And so I was trying to, that phenomenon of Western paranormal activity is always present with me. And I think that uh, there's a reason people see ghosts on roads, uh, because they're haunted. So.
I think I'd kind of like expand on this in a way. This reminds, earlier the word, infrastructure was spoken, and in the where I am in Oklahoma, where there are 39 tribes, are, and as a elected, servant leader in that tribe, the purpose of us, our story, our currents, our contemporary story, is linked to safety, looking after each other, the stewardship, um, uh, the there was the termination era here, and then tribes were reorganized. We still had kept our traditional organizations of these types of tribal councils, like at my mother's tribe, the Pawnee, we have the Nasharo Council, and they're a traditional chiefs council. But that's what we're doing. We're here. That's our jobs as tribes here, or as nations here, is to build and to provide and to create and care for our community, to expand those things, and electricity is a big part of it. One thing that was really kind of interesting to me in the first iteration of this piece was the kind of impetus was on safety, to have those first light poles, and this is still something that today is a I don't want to say excuse or reason, but a lot, the logical kind of, for this, or for surveillance. They're the greatest, reasoning, or for a lot of people, is surveillance, safety, So I'm really interested in these kind of like, they seem to be reflections of what we're of what I feel like what we are doing here in Oklahoma, and what we call Indian country here.
I should mention that that the artwork is amazing. Hand-done Gothic font artwork is done by Sebastian Aubin, and I think other people on his team. And that's our album cover. So for a vinyl pressing of this project, and we have some really interesting photos of ballet dancers at a 1950s Calgary power retirement party. It was this ballet dancer standing on a table, like pulling names out of a hat or something strange. They're very odd, that odd. There's some really odd stuff that weird names, like, so the names of the titles of the pieces are strange, like Great White Way, strange thing to call Broadway or any lighted area, and that is because that's what those areas that became lit by the light were called, the Great White Ways. And then like Prince of Darkness, Prince of Light was what I think one of the big proponents of lighting Calgary was named. They called him the Prince of Darkness and the Prince of Light. Also very odd. Great song names. I wouldn't want to be called that though.
What did the process of like compiling and gathering and finding look like? Or feel like, rather?
I'd say for us, it was more of a blind exploration into archival stuff, but most of the archive stuff for this version, I had a lot of assistance. I did a lot of it, and then I had a lot of assistance from my studio assistant, Bettina Perez, who's a great researcher. And then for the previous version, Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse went so far into the archives. And also we were open at the time, so Seth was able to go in person to find archival material and found some crazy stuff, some insane photos, some really great grid maps. This time I was looking at, we use maps as scores for this, and we were using the scores I was using scores of like 1911 LA has an interesting history of an electric railway. We were going to be full electric before no cars, and then Ford came in and screwed it all up. So the electric railway map is very interesting about the expansion of LA from a ranchero based community that comes off of the road of the Road of Kings, which was basically the road of enslavement of California Indians. And so that you can literally see the growth of the electric railroad in LA and the growth of Los Angeles as a city coming out of those, like a virus, one could say.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I would add, really, I would just talk about noise guitar as far as like, compiling, or I don't know, like our kind of our collaborative process. And it's to me, it seems music and sound for me is I grew up in a rural area, and around farmers, and I lived in town, but music was and albums and cassette tapes were, had the way to transmit and to share and to broadcast these ideas and these philosophies and things that otherwise I would have been completely ignorant of. And so it created a lifelong obsession with these kind of this with media, with vinyl records, with cassettes and things, which we both, Suzanne and I both have labels. But that to me, again, I would go back, to another, I would go to the kind of the rock world, and a reference to this Dylan Carlson from Earth, or he's better known as Kurt Cobain's best friend, talks, it's wood and metal, wood and metal. Also, it's something that free jazz and noise music, have these they kind of converge at certain points and depart at certain points, and it's kind of a lost art in a way. It's not a really popular way of making noise now. It's almost a dirty word, and so, but it still feels really. It's it's just a lifelong fascination, with guitars and things like that. Just purely still that same love from, when I was 12 or whatever, so because there was a lot of noise guitar in there.
Oh, wow, nice guitar. At least
And
20 minutes.
And I'm glad I kind of turned off with the Zoom for a minute, because I was kind of jamming out myself. So that would have been embarrassing for you all to see. I was like, I was feeling my own work there, How,
B-roll.
excited about my own work,
Very dorky. So anything else we haven't? I was trying to unmute David. I gave you all the powers to unmute yourself.
I'm here. I've just been trying to log in and hear all the soundtrack. It keeps cutting out.
Oh.
So
Okay,
I haven't
good.
got anything too much to say. I don't want to descend into Nathan's retrospective of listening in the 80s and 70s and trying to imitate in my basement with buddies.
Yeah, tapes and things. I remember they were a big deal, and getting them from older brothers or sisters, and that kind of created the enthusiasm that brought me to where I am today. And so
You were talking about being in Calgary, and they've got a cassette preservation society online. You tap into that, and if you scroll down, you'll get some vintage Dave Garneau and buddies called the Endorphins, we were called.
Wow.
nice. Nice. I must say that too, though. Like, as far as just personally for me, I mean, I do enjoy the idea of especially live music, and that kind of the communion, or that's really not probably the correct word, but that kind of the connection, with people live. That's probably one of my favorite parts about, and why I do. I'm involved in a project here for the Tulsa Artist Fellowship, the George Kaiser the Family Foundation, called Tulsa Noise. And this was a space that was, hostile towards experimental and outsider weirdo music and things. And so that project and this that I'm currently working on for the foundation, Tulsa Noise, is kind of making a space for that here, and so it's really rewarding. And this kind of my kind of trying to, I'm working with like my brand of sonic agency. Really, it's not, other people talk about sonic agency in different ways, but it's the ability of sound and music, and the power of sound and music. So they're able to contain such emotion and convey. So, music is a very powerful container, and sound is a very powerful container that they can chart futures, and so it's that idea of charting those, um, and one time, a friend mentioned to me that, the art world kind of follows and imitates music. In this sense, you can see that in DIY shows, small rock spaces, or small punk spaces, become like these kind of like pop up and or interventions and things like that, So I really truly do believe, and I'm still fascinated by the power of sound, and how now how it's been militarized and used to control crowds, especially in the times of this. What somebody said is really the a civil rights movement that's emerging here around. All of these here where I'm at,
In Tulsa, yeah.
in Tulsa, yeah, with the police violence and things like that, and or what we used to call well, I forgot about it, how we used to qualify all these police brutality and things like that. And so yeah, I think this is really rewarding to me, to work in these ways and to be able to play noise guitar and be able to marry it with that kind of these ideas and to transmit and broadcast them and share them with others.
Yeah, I mean, just to be very conceptual. I mean, I think that what this reminds me, I mean, what happened, I mean, actually, not to talk about Tulsa when you're the one in Tulsa, but what's interesting is that there's been this wave of revolt across the United States, and I know there's been similar protests in Canada, but in Los Angeles, things were extremely violent a few weeks ago with the National Guard. I was out there shooting a helicopter footage because I'm very interested in getting those helicopters defunded. I think we have 19 LAPD helicopters. It's not including the other ones. It's extreme. And I think about how quiet it was, and then the storm that came, the thunder that came, like the flood of action, and then it rolled across. I mean, it started in Minneapolis and then rolled across the country. And I feel like, and then last week there was a Trump rally in Tulsa, and it's like waves of history, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's overly poetic, but thinking about these stories and about how we understand Thunderbird and how we understand listening to Thunderbird, and the way that you hear it, there's an order by which you hear lightning and thunder. And I don't know, there's something about those. I know the stories, it takes a while to process all of what's happening in the world, but I know those stories do have answers. There's answers. I mean, I watched so much flood footage to do this project this week. I watched, people walk up to the LA River, and the LA River is almost non-existent most of the time because of the way it's dammed so far upstream. But when it floods here, it's very violent, and you can, in all of the recordings, the Tulsa recordings of the floods, they almost sound, I mean, you guys are very used to floods. And so there's I read about the history of acceptance of flooding as, okay, this is natural and we have to live with it. But in Los Angeles, people are horrified and in awe and terrified when the LA River floods. Mm-hmm. And there's a completely, I don't know. Those are my takeaways poetically.
I must say though, and I don't, mean to be too personal or anything here, but I remember as a young man at those 1986 floods. My father was district attorney of the county at that time, and I remember riding around with him and surveying, going to check in on businesses and check in on people and things, and to assess the situation. So it's really, really something that stuck really hard in my memory was this idea of this disastrous floods of '86, and the aftermath, and just riding around and checking on people and things. It was something I'll probably never forget.
And we're going to see more of those as things, as the weather patterns change.
Yeah, the Thunderbird, those lightning storms came this way too the past few weeks, alongside as the protests amped up and awareness was spreading, as well as these patternings of social distancing kind of ebb and flow. The thunderers came our way also. So it seems like there's this connection more than ever across Turtle Island, where we can connect and, have those conversations across.
I was curious, Nathan and Suzanne, there's sort of a kind of divisions that happen in Indigenous thinking around what's colonial, what isn't, and how you figure electricity apart from thunder beings in terms of electronic music. how you figure that into the colonial, non-colonial axis.
Well, I think I thought about this a lot because of the AI protocols projects that I've been working on, and trying to, one of the big questions with that is, where do you locate transformation within where do I locate intelligence? And then became a question of, where do I locate electricity? Because I was starting to think about that transformation, or the act of the ability or the potential for something to transform was the sacred part, or the important interiority part. And so then I think I have an idea now, and I think it's that that one of the big important moments for me in thinking was going to my grandfather Mahpianazin's sweat lodges, medicine ceremonies, and there's a lot of action around, a lot of focus around static electricity in ceremonies. And I think that I started to understand that moment of static electricity, and then see that within things such as computers, and maybe even electronics, and even simpler transformations. But the human body as a thing that's transformed from cells into, and then we get transformed into wherever we go. And so I started to think about that the actual artwork was existing in the movement of electricity through the circuits, through gold, copper, and then the interesting part is when it gets moved into airwaves, and so it goes out there into the world. And I mean, Nathan knows more about sound waves than I do, for sure, but the you have an MFA in sounds. I think that's kind of where I started to see that there is no point for me to be like, oh, this is a colonial tool. The violin, I don't know. I think that one's pretty colonial. Yeah. No.
I gotta. The Cherokee fiddle is a real thing. It truly is. It sounds just like other fiddling, but it is a real thing.
Okay, the way I play violin is really colonized. So
I think that decolonization. These ideas are. I see them as a process, and not something that is easily steps. Created into 1, 2, 3 steps, and then automatically you're decolonized. Or you could necessarily create dichotomies sometimes, or the dichotomies might become confused. I think it's very interesting. I know these Cherokee fiddle players. They speak Cherokee, and they play this hillbilly music, and I think it's beautiful. But this, First Nations, American Indians, Native Americans, we are going to encounter everything else that everybody else in the world is going to encounter with technology. All technology will come to us, just like it's come to anybody else, any other indigenous community. It's how it's done. It's how it's brought. Is it forced upon you? Is it, these ideas, or just hearing about these slave roads and things like that, that if that's this is the tool, if this is the process, this is the way I see it changing, that might be my concept. Just like sonic agency of decolonization, is it gives us the ability to have this conversation and to talk about what does it mean really. It's a term that is, terms can be used so often that they become meaningless. But as a person here who has watched a revitalization and kind of a resurgence of languages here. And to me, the most important thing, a decolonization you could ever possibly do, is to be able to think in your native language. If you can think in your native language, that is the ultimate, you're there, I like the complications that, I like the kind of, I don't know what they are. The ironies of this, that there is a Cherokee fiddle in songs, or at least it's because they have Cherokee or have taken it, and made it theirs. These people I know who, have these contests and a culture based around it. So I think it's fascinating, really kind of beautiful.
We need to hear a Cherokee Métis fiddle face off.
Yeah.
I just learned something. I didn't know there was such a thing.
Oh yeah. Tune into the next Zoom.
I think what got my interest was that you were speaking about electricity in a different way, and so the problem often becomes with these things that we think we're indigenizing is that as tools they can sort of retool us, and what's this form of resistance. And you mentioned, I'm getting nostalgic and romantic about people making music without the intent of broadcast, that moment of excitement that isn't about fame or performance, but about being with. But also the way you were linking electricity to static electricity to lightning. I think that's a way of understanding its pre-colonial existence, right? And so linking to that, privileging that as the site, I think is pretty exciting. All these sites that are non-commercial, pre-colonial are ways, because when you start thinking that way, you change your mind about how you might think about the goal of performance as well.
Yeah, definitely. This is a very specific broadcast-centric moment. This is very different, but I think that, the most exciting musical moments in my entire life have either been completely alone or for an audience of no one. Where I think of very specific. One time I played the best I've ever played my whole life. I played alone, and I knew it happened, and I was like, wow, and then I went, and then I had to go on stage like 30 seconds later, and I did not as good. And I knew that was the height of my violin career. And then the other one was, I think I was in high school, and I was with an orchestra, and we got to the festival, and there was no one in the audience, but we played amazing. It was a life-changing. I think we were playing something Baroque, and I remember knowing that, because you can feel it, that energy when just like in any other kind of group setting, like you can feel when everything lines up and the electricity is made and something transformative happens, and and all that, you all know it together, and if the audience is there to witness it, that's good too. But when so
that's beautiful. I was thinking too, Suzanne, a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, I can't remember, we were in Montreal, and you were fooling around with your acoustic sculpture and wondering about all the different elements, like you said, the gold or maybe lithium or all these things that have come from many other places, and the site of animacy in that. And I've been thinking about that so much lately, and I was wondering what I walked away feeling maybe 6 months later was that by privileging the objects, you were focusing on something that might be less authentic to what your project is, which is about the relationship between the body and the object and that moment. And you just described it again. It's not at a certain moment with music or with any art making, the tools, the objects become less important than that moment. And I'm wondering if you worked through that, whether that sort of object-centric thing is still essential when thinking about animacy, or is it about the animation of bodies in relation to each other? Is that a sort of a way out of that fetishizing?
I think the way out is through the different. I think first of all, it's different if we talk about like thinking our language is, I think that I think English is the wrong language to even have this conversation in. So if we could just switch to Lakota, that would be great. No, but it's true. Like talk about object and material. So you say object. I was in my mind. I always think material, but it's a noun. Maybe we should do this conversation in Blackfoot. I hear they're really good with doing away with nouns, and I think that the only way I'm able to move around the objectification of possibly living entities or entities with interiority is to try to hold on to the idea that their context and their like what's the word Jolene Rickard uses? It's like something cosmo landscape. I can't remember the word that I like so much, but it's like something, this cosmological landscape, this like there's no real good word for it. There's relationality that doesn't do it for me. Contextualist ethics maybe, like sometimes that works, but the real like overwhelming ability for things to be connected to other things. English just sucks to do this conversation, and I think that's the only way. And transformation, those are the, I can sketch around the possibility of moving beyond tools. The other thing is, I'm so excited when tools become part of our bodies more. I think, the goal with that the hair thing, that's what David's talking about, a hair braid sculpture that I'm still working on with Devin Ronneberg, is that sculpture is, it was on my head, and all we did, one thing, the first thing we did was move it off my head onto a sculpture. What changes, I don't know what that's. Someone else can find out. David, figure that one out for me. Is it now an object now that it's left the distance of my body? Does it become other people's bodies? Do we become a body entity together? I don't know.
I like that you evoked the Blackfoot, because it's those thinkers that I'm thinking through. And to me, Leroy Little Bear and those guys, they don't use the word like an ontology of these things, but there definitely seems to be a ranking of being. And by thinking about the being instead of, something having being, it's about relation, things in relation. But I was so taken by your sincerity and working through that object, thinking, how do you honor this thing that has such a multiplicity of parts that come from everywhere, And I struggle with that a lot. And so some people then race to the very simple, but you still are trying to figure out the complexity. And that's what I find, that makes us scratch our head, and I think that's very exciting.
Like, that's the thing. I think about all these things, like all these material tools that we use, instruments. Thinking through music is really helpful because we consider them instruments and we have really intimate relationships and we understand their histories. Like, you don't buy a guitar, like, without, Nathan can tell you, knows a lot about, really likes guitar. My violin, I can tell you, everybody has touched it, I have an intimate, and so I think you going through instruments can be really helpful to moving through this. I think of violin as having a body. I take it to the doctor. I pay a lot of money to take care of it. So I think about that, but I don't know. I think I forget where I was going with this, but I think it's a solvable problem with all these multiplicity. And I think about it like now I'm thinking about these materials as diasporic, like interior things that possibly have interiority. And that's the other thing. That's the thing that complicates it even further. It's not enough to just put hierarchy of things or to put things in a circle of everything's on the same level. Because that's not how I've learned that's not how our ontologies work either. Lakota ontology, there are hierarchies. Some rocks have interiority. Some rocks choose to come to you in their lifetimes. Most don't. There was this quote, I think it's in Descala, where he's like, okay, going to the Amazon, and there's, these people, they have relationships with plants, and then he goes to this other group and they don't have relationships with plants, and he's like, why don't you have relationships with plants? And I think the response was, these plants don't want to talk to us. They don't care about us. They're doing their own thing. I love that. I was like, some rocks have interiority, so I just, and it's a solvable thing. Like, the solution to dealing with this multiplicity of diasporic interiorities is to go make relationships with the people who are mining them and the locations that they're being mined in, and the indigenous communities, nation to nation, ontology to ontology. So that's where I'm at. There you go. That's my dissertation.
It's really important, because I think not solving, but encountering these problems allow us to imagine a future that isn't solely a poor replication of the past. And it allows us to, instead of only going towards simplicity and trying to cut out other kinds of noise only, a retreat from culture, to project into something that's complex. I just think, I just go back to, it was a very felt thing when you were dealing with this object and how do I deal with it? But the answer to that is a way to move forward. And I think it's something, I don't know if you're teaching it, but you will be, that comes up all the time. You know, students concerned about the colonial materials and how they can engage them differently. And they tend to do a retreat mechanism rather than sometimes go addressing their pleasures with the dominant cultures and how they can retool it. So, yeah, I'm going to keep thinking about that. Those are good answers. You know.
We're almost at 7:30 now. Do we want to do a little wrap up? Have any final thoughts?
Maybe I'll just, okay, I should thank everybody who helped facilitate this. And I want to thank Sebastian Aubin again and his team, studio. I want to thank Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse and the Mountain Standard Time Festival team for facilitating a few years ago. And really, they really made it possible for us to have time to think. Thank Initiative for Indigenous Futures, Jason Scawanati for hosting Nathan a year before that. I mean, you know, I'm really glad that this can move forward. Thank you, Nathan, for dealing with my editing. I hope you liked it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Susanna, and everybody. This has been really, really rewarding, you know, experience, and it's been great to be a part of this conversation. And it's really an honor that we could create something that really facilitates this type of discussion. And you know, I think these are important ideas. This is why I feel really so fortunate to be an artist and to devote my life to this, is because it's all about these ideas and you know, I'm using and complicating them, like you were talking about, David, like trying to really try to get in, you know, to grapple with these tough questions and do something that can also make people feel connected, unite them, you know, and bringing them together in a place. So, thank you all. Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Nathan.
Thank you both for being here and for sharing with us today. I hope we can see you. I hope I can see you do these kinds of thinkings and workings together in person. And I'm looking forward to see what you both come up with when you're in Tulsa, Suzanne. But thank you so much.
Hope to see you all in person sometime
soon.
Thanks, Rudi and Faye, for pulling this together too.
Of course. Happy to.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.